The reviews for Cyberpunk 2077 are out, and honestly some of them are just not that surprising. Now I completely agree that, and I think it's totally reasonable to bring up defects and bugs in a game or any game breaking glitches. Those are completely reasonable things to talk about in a review. I would expect to hear things that damage the player's experience in a game like this, especially coming from this producer or this developer, where The Witcher 3 was riddled with bugs. I completely understand that and get behind that. But that's not what a wide variety of reviewers are doing, or at least that's not a sizable portion of their reviews or talking points. What they are spending a lot of time talking about is how trans people are represented. Before I get into the screenshots I have, I just want to say that not just trans people, but people from all walks of life face real issues every single day. That much is true. That much is true for trans people. Life isn't easy for most people out there, and there are definitely things that need to improve around the world. With that being said, moaning about a video game is not where you start, and it's not going to fix your problems. Now let's run through some of these reviews and posts about Cyberpunk 2077 together. How Cyberpunk 2077 perpetrates transphobia and why gamers are calling an act of violence. Cyberpunk 2077 has a ton of hype surrounding it, but its transphobic elements cannot be ignored. Here's what players are saying. Gamers are not calling it an act of violence. How can you call a video game an act of violence? I mean, come on. We literally live in a day and age where everyone just moans about everything. According to critics, Cyberpunk 2077 not only fails its trans audience but seemingly goes out of its way to perpetrate negative stereotypes. However, while this is already problematic, what makes the controversy surrounding Cyberpunk 2077 even worse is the response the critics of the game have received. Several trans critics have been harassed and mistreated online, creating an atmosphere of violence towards the trans community that Cyberpunk 2077's developers choose to ignore or outright poke fun at. What negative stereotypes are you talking about, and who's been mistreating who? If you write something silly online, people can call you out on it. That's not harassment. That is having an argument or a discussion or open dialogue. Now there's more ridiculous screenshots here. Cyberpunk 2077 fetishizes trans bodies but hides trans people. Cyberpunk 2077's character creation is transphobic. When it comes to representation, trans people don't need your excuses. Trans representation is best discussed by experts, trans people. This particular case, however, does go a bit beyond opinion. In the case of Cyberpunk 2077, this is a community who is systematically persecuted, forced into poverty, and murdered to the indifference of most. This is not being offended, this is being worried that people would take the wrong things away from something, then manifest it in some violent way that steals the life of one of our trans sisters. As somebody who's been harassed and assaulted and abused for simply being trans in public numerous times, I have real and tangible concerns about how this big popular game will affect my well-being. This is really just pulling at straws. Why would an act of violence or narrative in a video game make someone that's completely sane attack a trans person? This is the same nonsense argument as when people say on the news, or these pundits or these idiots on the TV, that video games are making our kids more violent. No, they're not. And you people know that. All of us know that. Violent people are going to do violent things. Video games are not going to make them do it. People like me I can commit all sorts of heinous crimes in GTA and Red Dead Redemption. I'm not going to go out and do the same things in real life because I understand it's a video game. I'm not going to go out there and do something bad to a trans person just because I might have done something in a video game. This is just nonsense at its highest order. Violent people are going to do violent things. They don't need a game to tell them to do it. It's always been the case, and it's no different for this. If a white person shoots a black person in GTA, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to act that out. And if they are going to act it out in real life, they were going to do it anyway. Do you really think somebody with violent tendencies actually needs a video game to make them do it? This is just a ridiculous talking point. It didn't work with Mortal Kombat and GTA back in the day. It's not going to work now. And as tempting as it may be, the best thing to do if these critiques don't affect you is nothing. No, really, you don't have to engage. If a trans person says something is bad for their existence, you as a cis person don't have to tell them that it's good, actually. You don't have to convince them to play the game. You don't have to defend and cape for a multi-billion-dollar corporation as if there's some scrappy indie team. Every DM on every social media platform is insisting that I give a company that crunches their employees' bones into dust. Just feels like the most desperate plea for attention. This isn't about shilling for a company. This isn't about crunch time. This isn't about any of that. This is just about breaking down stupid talking points, and that's exactly what they are. They are stupid, low-hanging talking points. Now you can have your opinions, of course. I'm all for freedom of speech. Tweet away, say whatever you want. But then you've also got to deal with people having opinions of you. That's a perfectly normal thing to have go on everyone on social media. I'm not necessarily saying this game is good for a trans person existence. I'm saying it does nothing. It does not alter anything in any way, shape or form. Just like any games before this didn't change anything for black people, white people, Asian people, Hispanic people, anything in between. It doesn't tip the scale. It's just a game. Good people were never going to harm you in the first place. They were never going to hate on you in the first place. I know trans people. I am friends with trans people. This game, whether it portrays trans people in a bad light, a good light, or no light, is not going to change my perception to these people. If bad people didn't like you in the first place, they're not going to like you whether this game exists or not. It's really that simple. No matter how much this game may paint you in a positive light, it ain't going to change anything. If someone doesn't like you, the video game is not changing that perception. Of course, everyone is going to forget about trans people's complaints about this game because it's getting 10 out of 10, 5 out of 5 everywhere. Excited for this week ahead. Trans complaints are not going to be forgotten about, but they are going to be drowned out by this game's 10 out of 10s and 5 out of 5s because the game is getting 10 out of 10 and 5 out of 5 because of the gameplay and the world building. Your issues don't go away. The issues that trans people face don't disappear. They don't live and die with Cyberpunk. This is not the gateway for you to have a better life or a worse life. It's nothing. You are making a mountain out of a mole. Again, the ads are one of many aesthetic choices in Cyberpunk 2077 that are grating with no real point. There's one ad in particular that was in the topic of much discussion pre-release. It features a feminine person with a giant exaggerated veiny erection in their leotard and advertises a drink called Comantical with the tagline "Mix it up, it is everywhere." And while the purpose of it may be to show what a sex-obsessed, superficial, exploitive place Night City is, there's nothing in the main story or any of the side quests I did that gives it that much context. I found just one message on one of the many computers I logged into that commented on how lowbrow Night City culture is. The result is there's a fetishization of trans people at every turn in a game with only one very minor trans character that I found at least, and no way to play as an authentically trans character yourself. I assume they're referring to that billboard in the game, but guess what? Men and women have been getting fetishized for ages. I mean, just look at these billboards in real life of men and women. This is welcome to equal rights. Like, I understand that some people don't like it. Me personally, if someone's fit and in good shape and people want to put them on a billboard, go right ahead. I think people that do keep themselves in good shape should be celebrated. It's not an easy thing to do. If you're good looking, if God graced you with good looks, then more power to you. Go out there and, you know, have people put you on billboards and people look at you. And what is the difference when they do it for trans people? I don't understand what the difference is. Wouldn't you want to be treated equally? Or you just complain that people get fetishized in general? Because it looks to me like you're complaining specifically that trans people get fetishized. That's just a lie. It's just a lie. Cyberpunk 2077 is a triumphant RPG and CD Projekt Red with a striking world to explore, but undermines itself with misogynistic writing and an underwhelming narrative. Here's my review where I explore gameplay, trans issues, exploration and more. Why is exploring trans issues part of the review? What is this? Should we explore black issues, Hispanic issues, Asian issues? Or is this just a flavor of the month talking point? Like, I don't get how this is a thing. Every game that comes out, should we talk about how someone is not represented? How somebody has been misrepresented? How somebody's just not in the game? Is this what reviews are going to become now? This is actually ridiculous. It all starts with character customization. You'll pick a background for V, Nomad, Street Rat, or Corporate Shill, and then dive into an incredibly robust character editor save for one feature. While you're able to alter V's appearance down to the freckle, nails and genitals, there are only two options when it comes to gender identity and voice acting, male or female. There's no option for V to be non-binary, responding to they or them, and this is an oversight in a work of speculative fiction. Non-binary pronouns are common in mainstream consciousness even today, and it's stubborn at best to imagine a future with cellular head implants but without a more comprehensive understanding of gender identity. I mean, it's your fault for assuming that because people have robotic limbs that there's going to be a more comprehensive understanding of gender identity. That's not CD Projekt's fault, and it's just, oh my god, man. Just unbelievable. Cyberpunk 2077 is dad rock, not new wave. CD Projekt Red's open world game does not exactly have a futuristic world view. Forget that this is a fictional world, let's just boil it down to trans issues. That's the big issue with this game. In my 40 plus hours in Night City, I never met a single character of any significance whom the game made clear was trans, and one of the only queer coded characters I encountered was an extremely unsavory cybernetic surgeon who does extremely unsavory things. I did spot a trans flag on one character's vehicle, though that hardly counts as positive trans representation and doesn't even necessarily mean the character is trans. It felt more like a way for Cyberpunk 2077's creators to say they had included positive trans representation without actually putting thought into it or making trans people a visible part of the makeup of Night City. And this just goes on and on and on, and honestly I could be here all day with the screenshots, but I just found it beyond ridiculous that I'm gonna stop here and I'm gonna move on to something else. Now, as I said earlier, trans issues are a real legit thing, and even though I don't necessarily agree on all of the talking points, I can sympathize that just like any other community, they do have their own issues. Just like there are issues with police culture and people in the black community. But was moaning about the relationship between Spider-Man and the police productive? No. Has it done anything to better the relationship between the police and black people? No. Has anything changed since Miles Morales came out? No, they haven't, and moaning about trans representation in Cyberpunk is not going to change anything. Now, should there be trans representation in video games? Of course, why not? Did CD Projekt represent trans people in this game? Yes, I think they did. Are people moaning again for no reason because that's what people do in this day and age? Yes, that's what I believe. That is my belief. I mean, I'm doing it right now too. I'm moaning at the people moaning. And of course, there's always going to be the option of just not playing it. Crowdfunding as a group and making your own game. Now, before I go, I did read some of the comments on my Cyberpunk video I made the other day. And there was one comment in particular that I did want to address. Now, to the person that made this comment, the reason I didn't type to you is because honestly I am pretty bad when it comes to replying to messages. I did read through it, I just could not be bothered to sit there. And the way YouTube works, when you type something, if you go back to look at the rest of the message because your message was so long, it will delete what I was typing, and I wasn't at my PC at the time. Now that I am, I'm just going to have it as an open discussion. Hopefully you see this and we can talk about it, or you guys can talk about it in the comment section below. I do read your comments, it's a little long to reply to all of them because some of them are really long. So I'll reply to it in video format. So I'll read to you a quote from the paragraph this person sent me and we'll break it down. Now, they started with due respect, you don't understand half the problems of the trans community. First, I would like to break down your comparison between the first world country and third world country. You can justify the actions of a serial killer by justifying that Hitler killed a lot more people than them. Similar, you can't say that others have it worse, so you don't have the right to be treated better. Now, this is not what I was saying. This was not the point that I was making. But no, that analogy was not an intelligent one to make. This is basically one of those reaches where you go for the most extreme example to get your point across. To reference what you're saying, killing is killing. It's just about the worst thing you can do to anyone. White, black, straight, gay, trans, it doesn't matter. It's the worst thing you can do to anyone. So using that as a talking point is just low-hanging fruit at best. It's not similar in any way, shape or form, but I get what you're trying to say. You just worded it poorly. You do have the right to be treated better or at least equal, but this is just screaming into air. Someone's fantasy world isn't necessarily an attack on you or a type of people. It certainly isn't in this case. And they went on to say, let's talk about pronouns. How would you feel if people made unjust assumptions about you? Let's say you are an American person and people just assume that you are a criminal. I think they meant to say African American. Similar, if someone assumes your gender based on your voice, it's just stereotypical. We are portraying future in this game and it's not realistic to have such stereotypes in this game. Let's for a second assume that you don't care about trans people, but then also this goes against the law because you would assume that a future with such advanced technology will also have a better understanding of gender identity, gender role and gender expression and gender attributes. Also, they are not erasing non-binary people who prefer they them pronouns. They could have avoided all this by just avoiding pronouns like in Saints Row, or they could have given the option to choose pronouns during character customization. People do make unjust assumptions about me. It's actually happened more times than I care to remember. I've been called all sorts of things, and guess what? I just don't care. The area I live in, I'll give you guys some background on me. The area I live in is a pretty crime-driven area. Crime is extremely high, and unfortunately, in my area, it's black people that commit most of the crime. That is just an unfortunate reality of where I live. And the police around here stop a lot of black people because that is where the crime is coming from. I've witnessed it firsthand. Now, I don't get offended when I get stopped, and I get stopped fairly often. It hasn't happened recently. Before, it was happening quite a lot. And I know why I get stopped. When I go with my girlfriend down to a predominantly white area, whilst most people treat me completely fine, I get treated with respect, I don't get treated any differently, there are those people that sort of look at me like they're kind of shook or they're kind of scared, and I know why. It's because the media portrays some black people in a negative light. But guess what? Life goes on. I do not sit there crying about it. You see, the way I look at the world is I always think about all the shit that people face around the world. Is what I'm dealing with right now really that big of a deal versus some black dude or some black woman across the pond getting sold in some third world country to work until they die for peanuts? Is what I'm dealing with right now really that deep when some woman is being attacked simply for being a woman in a part of the world where women have less rights? Is what I'm dealing with right now really that deep? Then I stand there and think, who the hell is this person anyway? Do I actually care about what they have to say? Is it going to affect me as soon as I leave this situation? No. It's not. Nobody's going to care and the world is going to keep on spinning. This is my problem with people. They think that their tiny small issues, whether it's white, black, Asian, gay or trans, is this big thing, and it's not. There are much bigger problems in the world. Now it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be treated fairly, but sometimes you got to stop and look at a situation and be like, is it that deep? Now, we're not portraying our future in this game, to answer your next point. The game's portraying its own made up future. It's not real life, and it's your fault for assuming because someone has robotic limbs that they also acknowledge gender pronouns or gender expression. That's on you. You made that assumption. This game never said that it is portraying the future or that it's projecting to portray the future. You assume that. Not CD Projekt. They have no obligation to do those things based on your assumptions, and you're also not obligated to play their game. They go on to say, finally, let's address the biggest slap to our faces. Remember the mix-up poster? There was a huge controversy regarding it, and the artist responded with a statement that said it represents the corporation in the distant future where they just use people anyhow to sell their products, and the game is about fighting such corporations. But CD Projekt did the very same thing in real life. Some cis woman cosplayed that trans woman from the mix-up poster, and she used a fake glowing duck, and CD Projekt promoted that cosplay in order to sell the game. If you feel like it's not messed up, let me tell you why you are so wrong. People were very quick to compliment this cosplayer, but the same people would discriminate if it were an actual trans person. Don't believe me? You don't have to look too far. Just look at a so-called first world country called USA. Just look at the number of trans women that were brutally murdered because they were clockable. If I get raped and killed in my country, the convict can get out after 6 months in prison. That's messed up. A cis woman cosplaying a trans person gets so much love and praise, but a trans person just trying to live their happy life gets a bullet, and that hypocrisy bothers me. This is the same nonsense argument people make when Scarlett Johansson was selected to play a trans character, or I think it was Bryan Cranston was playing a dude in a wheelchair, but because neither of them are from those respective communities, it was unacceptable. They're actors just like this cosplayer was cosplaying. Now all of a sudden people can't dress up however they want. What happened to being inclusive? How is it CD Projekt's fault if someone else is discriminating against trans people but they want to promote someone for dressing up as their character? And what you're saying with regards to discrimination is purely an assumption. The reality is that you don't know if people would have discriminated against this trans person. I certainly wouldn't have. Why would I care? I mean, I don't even care this woman cosplayer that she isn't trans. Normal people don't care about these things. There's an echo chamber online and people get the wrong idea and they think it's everyone. It's not. It's a very small minority of loudmouth people that make everyone look bad. But why are you linking the murder of trans women in America to a cosplayer as if that validates your point? It doesn't. You can't keep using extremes to get your point across. It actually dilutes them. It dilutes your entire conversation because the average person in the West just isn't like that. The attacks on trans people have literally nothing to do with this game, and it will have nothing to do with this game moving forward. Then they said it's not just about being represented, it's about being represented right. You wouldn't accept Ryan Reynolds playing Nelson Mandela after putting on some black paint on his face, right? So why should we settle for any less than a proper representation? This is such a dumb talking point, my lord. As far as I'm aware, anyone can be trans, right? You don't actually have to go through any type of surgery to identify as the opposite gender. Just look at Elliot Page, or formerly known as Ellen Page. As far as I'm aware, he's gone through no transformations like surgically whatsoever. It's just that Elliot has now stated they don't want to be referred to as a woman anymore. They want to be referred to as a guy. As far as I'm aware, they are now considered trans, right? Why would somebody need to go through the surgery to be considered trans? So if that is acceptable, what exactly are you talking about? If this is something that has been recognized and accepted by the trans community, why does it matter? By your logic, this cosplayer could just say they're trans and that's it, problem solved. It's just pulling at straws. If I can say that I'm trans today, I could cosplay as a woman if I wanted to. So if that cosplayer came out and said I'm trans, then suddenly your whole argument falls apart. So it's not the same as Ryan Reynolds and Nelson Mandela. It's a completely different thing. Then they said, but I also understand the world we live in, so I know it's going to take time for things to change. It took time for Hollywood to stop casting white men for black characters, so I know it will take time for trans representation to get better. But I just wish things happened a bit faster. You don't know how important it is that to be represented, because for once we would like to see ourselves portrayed as normal human beings just like other people. No, you're mistaken. I never grew up yearning to be represented in media. As a matter of fact, the niche mix of races that I am, I'll probably never be represented in any comic book, any video game, any movie. But I never looked to race. That's not what I was looking at. I was looking at the contents of someone's character. I don't care if you're trans. I don't care if you're gay. I don't care if you're straight. I don't care if you're black or white. I never looked at something and thought, oh, they're black, they're Greek, they're this, that and the other, so I instantly liked them. I looked at what kind of person they were and if their personality resonates with mine. Gay, straight or trans, it doesn't matter. I would give CD Projekt Jr. the benefit of the doubt and say they have made these mistakes because of their ignorance whilst having good intentions, and that's the reason that we need to talk more about these issues, it's not issues, and perhaps work to make the next Cyberpunk game even more inclusive. If you would like to have an open conversation, know a little more about trans community and why these things are crucial for our rights, feel free to reach out to me. Now, as I said before, the reason I didn't comment on the post to this person is because honestly, I'm just bad with replies, and YouTube comment section often turn into a mess pretty quickly. So instead I chose to respond in video format here because I have received emails just like this one. Not comments, emails that have been sent to me personally regarding my videos in the past and the CD Projekt video I did the other day, so we can have a conversation on here. Now, as someone that is mixed, I understand that there are a fair amount of issues that affect people with my ethnicities. With the ethnicities that I am, I understand that there are issues out there, but I do not think that a video game is where they get mended or where I should moan about them. That's just my opinion. Feel free to comment in the comment section below. Thanks for watching the video, guys, and I will catch you next time. Peace.